I'm making it less and less every week.
That's the way I feel. I wake up every day feeling further behind than I was the day before. It's okay.
I'd like to call this Planning Commission meeting to order. Today is Thursday, June 26th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. We will start our meeting with a prayer. Who wants to pray? Want to pray? Member Wilson will pray. And then please join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our Father in heaven, we once again bow our heads before thee. We're grateful for the opportunity we have to meet together in this beautiful county in the Planning and Zoning Commission duties. We would invite your spirit to attend us here tonight, that we may be able to reason things out and look at the problems that may be presented. We could help make them better. We're grateful for all the people that live around us. Ask a blessing upon them as well, and say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Member Wilson, do I have a second? Member King? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimous. Any declarations of conflict of interest? For tonight's agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move on. Public comment. Feel free to come forward if we have no administrative items on the agenda tonight. Oh. Yes. Before public comment, I'd like to welcome Member Sessions back to the Planning Commission.
Thank
It
you.
was a long couple months without you.
I enjoyed the back seat. It's nice back there.
We like you better up here. Welcome back. And I guess, yeah, it's all of our new members. We just have 2 legislative hearings tonight. If you have a public comment about anything else not on the agenda, feel free to come forward now. Each legislative item will have its own public hearing at that time. Seeing none, we will move on. Josh, you're up.
About 1.5 years ago, we updated the geohazard section of the code to modify and add some additional exceptions. During the 1.5 years after that, we've had multiple conversations between property owners, the county attorney, county geologist, and the county engineer about the 25% prohibition. We have quite a few lots and parcels within the county that are developable, and the prohibition, the flat prohibition, would create legislative taking, regulatory takings. So the goal of this text amendment is to provide an opportunity for property owners who have developable lots to pursue that development and place the liability not on the county but on the professionals that have the licenses. So staff is proposing modifying multiple sections of the code that would remove the 25% prohibition and just require every development request where the property exceeds 15% or greater to go through the geohazards report with the mitigation factors suggested or required by a licensed geologist and geotech engineer. The conditional use permit section has a section about environmental concerns, and so it allowed for construction of properties that exceeded 25% already with a conditional use permit. I don't think that's changing with the proposed text that that is in your code. So if it exceeds the 25% and goes above that, they would still be required to get a conditional use permit. But those are the main changes that are being proposed right now. And then I can turn this over to the county engineer to kind of talk a little bit more about it.
Thanks, Josh. For the record, Mark Miller, county engineer. This is something that a lot of cities on the Wasatch Front, I should say cities on the Wasatch Front do have maximum slope, buildable slope. I've seen them as high as 30%. I wasn't overly surprised when I saw ours was 25%. 15 years ago or so when I came on board here. I believe as land prices have gone up and as we've gone through what I consider the best geohazards ordinance in the state right now, we sat at this table for weeks with some of the top professionals in the state working on this ordinance. Very up to date, state-of-the-art code that we have. It's working really well. And basically, as I look at this, it'd be more from a geotechnical engineering perspective. It's if people are willing to spend the money, they can mitigate the hazards of building on a steep slope. The only reason I would feel comfortable, well, other than this potential legal issue with the taking, with going forward with this is because I've seen throughout the years how there always seem to be ways based on the geologist recommendations and then the geotechnical engineers designs where they can mitigate potential hazards and where they can actually build safely in some of these hazardous locations. There are areas in this county where that's just not feasible. Madam Chair, up by you, there are a few areas where the Norwood Tuft is 80 feet down. And it'd be very difficult to try and get some helical piers or pylons or anything down through that to stabilize some of the ground. However, we get to find out ahead of time. We have a lot of historical data. Our geologist knows this area very well. The other geologists we work with here all seem to know it very well too. We have a lot of geologic history. And so I feel quite comfortable that if someone were to come in here and want to build on, let's say, a 30% slope or something, I feel quite comfortable that we would have enough oversight to ensure that their geologist and their geotechnical engineer gave us designs that our geologist and myself would feel comfortable recommending approval for. So. And I should mention the 25% is somewhat random, I think. I don't think there's Bill. Yeah. Bountiful's 30 and and so when we start tossing this around, this idea of, hey, if it's steeper than 15, let's just do a geohazards, just look at the property and move forward with it. I felt comfortable with it, and I don't feel real strongly either way, unless somebody came in and said, hey, I can build on this lot. I'm willing to spend a few $100,000 to stabilize it, and you're taking it from me based on this ordinance. What's your reason? And I don't know that we have a great reason for the 25%. So, are there any questions for me?
I have a couple, if I may, Mark. You say this is a taking. What are they? Where is that coming from? Because we've had this in place for years and years and years. I haven't heard that term before. I mean, I've heard it with other things, but I've not heard it with this.
Yeah.
So where is that wording coming from, and who's
And I don't think anyone's threatened that, and I haven't seen. I've been here a long time, and I haven't seen anyone come up with that.
Well, there must-
I think it's the question is if somebody were to make that claim, and I think the county attorney's the one that brought this up. How do we defend the 25%? So if somebody bought a piece of property, and as you know, they usually don't read our ordinance before they buy it. They bought a piece of property and they came in, they find it's unbuildable, and then they say, okay, our attorney's gonna look at this, they come to us, and then if we were to have to prove or give a good reason why it's at 25%, I don't know that it's defensible.
So how is 30% defensible versus 25?
I don't think it is.
That's, yeah.
Yeah, what?
Can you
what-
tell me where this is coming from? Who you're just saying generally, and people
Yeah,
when they
it's-
buy a lot. And
It's
that's,
not from me, so I'm gonna let Josh address that. I'm just here as the engineer to give you some perspective from just so you know how your engineer feels about it. But I didn't come up with this. so
That's what
gonna
I'm
let
asking you though.
Josh-
You're saying 25% is hard to defend. 30% apparently is easier to defend.
I don't think so. I doubt, Bill, we have what's called an angle of repose with different materials, and that's at any type of soil, what it would actually hold itself stable at. And that varies from soil to soil. So I don't really, I don't know. I don't know that, the taking issue, I have no opinion on that because I've just heard from, what they're telling me. So I'm just going to give you my engineering. I'm going to stick to the engineering side of that. Let's have Josh talk about that.
Can I ask you another question
Yeah,
before you sit
yeah.
down? We have maps that show what areas are buildable with a 30%. What does that do to the county's availability for building? Does it expand it considerably, or is it not really much different?
I don't think, again, this is just drawing on experience, so it's a little bit nuanced. I haven't had an experience here where somebody had 30% and we're trying to get us to accept the 25. But I don't see many, I actually don't see how this is going to affect many pieces of property. Most of the time, and I'm going to back away from this because maybe the legal and your development director have seen this, but first of all, I haven't seen the 25% challenged from an engineering perspective. When they brought it up to me, I'm like, yeah, I don't know how we could defend it. Bill kind of agreed. But then secondly, I haven't seen people coming in saying, hey, we want to build on 30%. We did have one person up on Highway 66 that was, like I said, bought a lot, didn't know the ordinance, and then they were struggling. They ended up being able to find a piece on their property where they could build that was less steep. And of course, that's where they want to build anyway because it doesn't cost nearly as much. So. Yeah, and I haven't got a really strong opinion about this one way or another.
Thank you, I appreciate you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Does this scope apply the individual as far as
Individual.
them taking on any potential loss or anything?
I think it pushes the liability to the
Individual.
engineers
Yeah.
certifying
Yeah.
that it can work.
What happened is years ago,
County side at all?
the county had this weird geologic site. We had a committee, and we were taking on way too much
That's kind of my question.
responsibility.
Is this
Yeah.
ability
So now,
by themselves
right.
part of this?
Our ordinance says, hey, geologists that are coming to us, you have to have insurance, 2 million, and you have to have done this type of work for at least 5 years. We need to know that you know what you're doing. And because the person that puts their stamp on that, they're taking on the liability. We didn't want it. we have a third-party geologist just to kind of look over their shoulder and make recommendations. But the whole purpose behind rewriting the ordinance and having a different geologic perspective here was so that the liability stuck with the geologist and geotechnical engineer doing the work, because they both have to have liability insurance.
That's just kind of my question.
Yeah.
It's more than some places in the county which has caused issues in the past where they build them, where those areas are. That's, and I understand why it was written that way. I just want to make sure that, as far as you're concerned, legally,
Legally, it's on the people certifying.
Yeah. So,
I have a question for Josh, or
yeah.
unless you have more
I'm
questions.
feeling
for-
very inadequate, so let's get
No,
him
no,
back up
no.
here.
Unless someone has more for Mark.
Okay, thank you.
I'll speak into it better.
Okay. My question's more procedural. I didn't think staff could initiate a code change.
Staff in general cannot initiate a code change. That is correct.
So,
So in discussion with the county attorney felt that this was important enough to bring forward.
we can ignore code then.
No, you can't ignore code.
Well, I don't see an exception in the code that,
That's correct. So if you'd
Maybe
like
our
us to
attorney-
take it back, I can talk to the county commission and get the county commission to bring it forward.
We've had a discussion about this previously. I haven't talked to Garrett about it. I do know that Garrett had been pushing for this and for Mark and other people to kind of meet together to get it revised. I think the biggest concern was the taking, because the 25% is arbitrary, and it sounds like 30% can be arbitrary, that there's really no reason, especially if you have the safeguards. Additionally, it was my understanding that there were some people coming in and
Yeah, we've had several people come in wanting to build a home on a legal developable lot. And with the prohibition of 25%, if I were to say, no, you can't develop your lot, which is a legal subdivided lot that is developable according to state statute, that would be a taking, and the county would be liable for that.
so although they didn't, file a formal application and pay a
They
fee
didn't-
for it.
right, they
It
didn't
was
threaten it, but
brought
it-
to our legal attention, and so this is where it initiated. But if the planning commission is more comfortable maybe directing it, and then we can reschedule it, I don't think there's any,
I guess my question
need that we
to
get
you,
it done
Janet,
now.
is what are you gonna do when someone comes in and says, I have a 35% lot? This is an unjust taking and I'm gonna bring an action against you. Is that,
Well, we're not
I was
recommending.
talking to Janet,
Unlimited.
Josh.
so that's why I think in getting rid of the percentage, the 25% not having, I guess the new code now has 30%?
nothing.
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 So getting rid of the percentage completely, then we don't have that arbitrary figure. And we're relying on the certification of the geotech and the engineers and making sure that that's a buildable lot.
So I can see, I actually don't have a problem with this. I think that we should try and help people if they can. But my curiosity is, if we make this county-wide, is your discrepancy on this, looking it over, is it gonna be the same as someone who's living in Mountain Green in a nice neighborhood? You're gonna go out and make sure that their geotech matches? You're gonna say, this is your responsibility and you have to come up with these?
Yes, I believe there's safeguards with this in the application process. In fact, in that
I
they
read
have
them,
to
I'm
get
just
that.
curious if you'll enforce them.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think we've been better at enforcement, and yeah.
Josh, I have a question for you. In the maps, what does that do to developable land? Do you looked at that at all in terms of 25 versus 30?
Yeah, the maps typically won't change. The colors, we'll just have to modify the red a little bit. Anything that's orange is under 15%, and red is greater than 50% already. So
50%?
15, I'm sorry.
15%.
Yeah, so there shouldn't be a change to the maps. I can double check and make sure those percentages are correct, but it won't change.
So when I read through this, I assumed it was more about shifting liability. Is that accurate? Or
That
it
is
about opening up additional.
No,
area?
that's correct. Yeah. It's for those property owners that have developable land that want to do something with it, and I don't want the county to have to be liable to purchase that land because we've taken it.
So let me ask you the same question I asked Janet. What are you gonna do when somebody comes and says, I got a 30% grade, 35% grade?
I would say then you need to get a geologist, and that geologist needs to submit to us a geohazard report showing the mitigation items that you're going to do to mitigate any potential slope, slide, or whatever. Our engineer and our geologist will review that and sign off on it or not.
Is there a hard line in terms of percentage of slope that you guys say, we're not interested?
I think the hard line is going to come from the financial burden that the mitigation factors are going to bring into it. So it's not something that the county is going to require them to do or not. It'll be, in order to mitigate this, it's going to cost you X amount of money to do, which will make it financially unrealistic.
I'd push back on that a little. I think there's a lot of parts of our county that have a lot of wealth. And just because you can do something doesn't always mean you should. But I get what you're saying, that at some point, but we do have a really high average home price in
I just
good
don't
amount of
think
our county.
the county should be liable if we prohibit somebody from building on a legal developable parcel or lot. And I think the reports that are created by those geohazard geologists and geotech engineers should be the deciding factor as opposed to an arbitrary percentage.
I mean, it came forward to mitigate the county's liability, right?
That's correct.
I mean, that's actually pretty insightful from the attorney to do that. The onus now being back on the owner and the geotech that's fairly standard. I mean, regardless of the gradient, right? Regardless of county as well. When you said that other counties have it as a percentage, are others, do you know if any others are looking at striking the percentage from code?
I haven't looked into that, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, we got a question for you, Josh. Where did the 15% requirement for both the geotech report, which is pretty standard. Geotech reports, I mean, you do it for 0% slope. With the geohazard report coming in at 15%, where did that come from? Is there any backup information, case study, design requirements for that? I mean, I see that as somebody who's in that industry being somewhat prohibitive for an individual to look at that and be like, okay, my lot is 15%. I now have to get not only a geotech report, but also a geohazard report. And it's a one size fits all. So I'm trying to understand where that number came from. I don't have a problem with the 25 versus 30% because I think high slopes are risky, not only to build for safety, but also for long term. But really that 15% kicks in additional cost that they've got to do up front prior to even submitting really the plan set.
The 15%, I can't tell you where that percentage came from. It was in our code before. The county geologist or county engineer might be able to answer that. As far as the geohazard report, there are other factors that would require a property owner to submit a geohazard report anyway. Slope and slope stability is only one factor. Hazardous soils are another, like the Norwood tuff, things like that. So the slope is just one aspect of what would trigger a geohazard and any mitigating factors that would come from that. But as far as where the 15% came from, I don't have an answer for you.
Okay.
I think that's a hard question because, like where we live, to Mark's point, there's areas that are less than 15% slope, and if you built your house in those areas, it would slide and move because the Norwood tuff, and the bedrock, even though it's not a crazy slope lot. So I think it kind of becomes you just have to review it case by case basis, and I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but
Yeah, the soil would be looked at anyway. So if
Exactly.
your property has zero slope on it and you have a hazardous soil, you're still doing a geohazard report.
Okay.
And I guess I don't have a problem with the, okay, it's fine.
So that 15% number is based on statistical compilations of actual landslides that have occurred on slopes. And then they go back and look at what kind of slope did that landslide occur on. And so what they found is that most landslides occur on slopes that are steeper than 15%, particularly in Morgan County where you have that Norwood Formation. Or Lake Bonneville, sometimes Lake Bonneville sediments. So that's where that sort of 15% break comes from. And sort of what the purpose of what we're trying to do here is take out that arbitrary 25% or even 30% and just say, if you've got 15% slopes and you want to build on them, then do a study.
And I understand that.
Prove that you're going to fix it or that you can fix it.
I understand that. What I'm trying to understand is the 15% itself. So you're saying there is case study behind it.
Yes.
Okay. That wasn't included in anything we looked at. So really all we're looking at is 15%, you have all of these added requirements no matter what.
Right.
So if we're talking to somebody who wants to build, or they come in to Josh and ask, hey, Josh, I'd like to build, and there's 15%. Okay, that's on the checklist now. That has to be done. And the question is going to be why. So if that information is available, honestly, I'd like to see it myself, but I have a feeling that they're probably going to ask the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
My concern is these steep slopes along our county roads. Our driveways, I think longer driveways are 12%, so you're going to get switchbacks. It's just all these cuts, unsightly. Ludma talks about aesthetics of the county. I don't know if we want a bunch of switchbacks. 'Cause we have lots of places where the steep is right to the road on Morgan Valley Drive and Old Highway Road. So you throw the driveways into the mix. The house is one thing, but dealing with switchbacks and cuts, sure.
I consulted with the city of Ivins for about 3 years on their hillside protection ordinance. And what they did to, anybody who's been down in that area has seen the scarring that's occurred on the mountainsides in St. George and Washington and Ivins. Well, not so much in Ivins, but the other areas, Hurricane. Ivins was very proactive, and they did a hillside protection ordinance that is a very good ordinance, by the way. And it prevents that scarring based on all of the items that you have to adhere to in their code. So they took care of that scarring that you're talking about with a hillside protection ordinance. And it is something that we probably should look at in this county, particularly if people start to build up on hillsides. Because if you look at Ivins compared to those other communities down there, it's the only one that doesn't have scarred hillsides. And they look horrible. They really look bad.
I agree.
Any more discussion before we move into public hearing? Do I have a motion to go into public hearing?
So moved.
Member Wilson, do I have a second? Member Telford, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're moving into public hearing. If you'd like to come forward and speak on this topic, please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Tina Kelly, Mountain Green. I know there's a 3-minute limit, but I might go over. You guys can shoo me out. This item is listed as a public hearing, but to me, it's very vague in its notice to the public of what is actually on hearing. I see geohazards code text amendment, Request for approval of text amendment to the Morgan County Code to clean up and clarify the geohazard section and other sections mentioning slopes. I, as having been on the council before and having sat in these meetings, still didn't understand that you were talking about changing the slope requirements. And I don't know where that came from because I hadn't heard that in the county commission, and I hadn't heard that request come from the planning commission. And knowing that it comes from where it comes from, I feel a little bit better, but not that much. I have a lot of concerns about changing the slope requirements. I didn't get this gray hair. I'm quite young, actually, I feel like. But I got this gray hair sitting on the council and dealing with these issues. And I thought that the ordinance that we put together was a good ordinance, and it's been tweaked from time to time, and I thought that's what was going on here. But this is a major change, in my opinion. I'm not an engineer, and I have great respect for your county engineer. He understands that. I think he understands that. My house in the Highlands sits straight across from the Hayes house, or not Hayes house, because the Hayes house isn't there anymore. It's gone because of a landslide issue, building on Norway Tuft. And they actually had geotechnical professionals who told them how to build and where to build and that it would be okay. And I can remember a discussion that my husband had with the county engineer at the time saying, you can see those trees, they're at a lower height than the trees around them, but they're part of the same growth. There's been a landslide there in the past, and oh, they can do wonders these days. If they do everything right, it'll be fine. It's not fine. That house is gone, and the county had to deal with the consequences of that for many years. The neighbors are still dealing with the consequences of that. And to Member Sessions' point, the cut of the hillside and the switchbacks. There's also another piece of property right above the Hayes property that I call the Nash Cut, because there's a big cut that goes up that hillside. The applicant who owned that property had an application, got the application approved to put that cut in. He actually wanted to build on the other side of the hillside, but he needed to come up the back side of the hill with his driveway. That cut's still there, that nothing's happened there, but I presume because of the Norwood Tuft, but nothing, that's another scar on the mountain that's right outside my view. I don't think the public had the warning. If the public knew that you were talking about changing the 25%, it might be called hue and cry, and you're not supposed to listen to it. But there would be more public in here if they knew that was what was going on. Also, if it was directed by the county attorney, then I would prefer to have the planning commission or the county commission have it come forward and have there be a little bit more teeth in that, so it's not challenged. These are just my thoughts, and I know that I'm emotional about it, but I dealt with it, and the people in the community are dealing with it, and I think that more than just Mountain Green will be dealing with it. This is going to open up a lot of areas, and I'm not sure that those areas need to be opened up. I also think you should consider a hillside protection ordinance, and maybe you put that one above this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Seeing
Move we
none.
go to public hearing.
Yeah. Member Sessions?
Second.
Member King, public hearing, or all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimous.
Tina brought something up. I didn't read the actual posting, but it talks just about recreational dwellings. Is this all this refers to is recreational dwellings?
No, I would agree. We should probably renotice it and then hold another public hearing.
And I've got a question. I know we're doing another public hearing, but it kind of spurred on part of this conversation is understand building homes, structures, but the scarring and then the sloping of those switchback driveways could also cause for concern of I know it's 12% on a driveway, but is this going to cause any issues with how they access that buildable area and possible landslides just from cuts? I know as we're looking, like in the Milton area right now, there's some cuts going in on the way up to Deep Creek there. you've got homes and structures below where those cuts are going on that driveway, 12% slope going up. But what about all those homes below it that would cause potential issues in the future? Is there something that we need to look at that way in this text amendment as well, is protecting those homes and those other structures below those?
I think you're referring to Kyle Brown's property, if I remember correctly.
There's a couple there that are,
But it's a fair point. 'cause
Those
they're-
properties have, those property owners are, part of those cuts were to complete their geohazard report.
well, and like I said, just questions, will that then take in any of the structures below? Will that report as far as driveway and access to those homes? And future consequences of those as well, or?
Yeah, you can ask the county geologist and the county engineer what those reports entail. I typically read through them, but I'm not the professional.
Yeah, I guess it was just kind of a broad question to whoever can kind of speak to that.
Yeah. Neighboring property loss is what you're saying, essentially, if there's issues.
Yeah, there's potential, like I said, those lots, the access to those are accessing behind other property owners. There's potential for slides into other properties. So what are we doing to protect that?
Per the code, they're required to, anything that they do or mitigate or cut has to be in a safe manner for not only that property, but everybody adjacent to them. So, I mean, part of the reason for doing these studies is to make sure that they do it right for not only their property, but for everybody else.
And that's kind of referencing the public comment there too, is that
Right.
we're also potentially putting hazards for surrounding areas, not just for home. I mean, in construction, we get a geotech report. We read those reports in construction, understand where we're building. But where we're building is our only concern. Outside of that, we really don't take that into concern. We're just, as far as the construction side of it, my profession, it's where am I putting my stuff, making sure it holds up. Outside of that, generally, it's not as much concern. And if I'm thinking about building a home, I'm going to pour all my money into this geotech report, make sure my house doesn't move. Probably not as concerned on driveways, access, things like that. That was kind of my question, is will that report entail?
Driveways and access roads are actually part of the code now, and they actually have
Okay,
to
so
do
it'll-
studies on those as well as wherever they're putting their structure.
And I just wasn't seeing that in here, so that was kind of the question I had.
Yeah, they're already part of the code, so, yeah. In this last code change, that was one of the significant changes to it.
To Tina's point and to Mark Miller's point, I know I asked about ridgeline protection. I think I assumed hillside with that, and I don't know if we need to make a motion to change that, but I know staff has been asked to do changes to ridgeline and or hillside, and maybe Mark could help with that to protect the county from turning into St. George. And I don't know your guys' thoughts on that. I mean, we could pull up the text and see if we need to make a change to include hillside, but I think it just said sensitive land. I think was the wording we used, ridgeline and sensitive lands. So I think hillside would probably fall under that for that code request.
So, Chair, may I make a recommendation? If you're gonna do that recommended text amendment for the ridgeline or hillside, would you guys also be inclined to do a recommendation that they make the text amendment for the geohazard, the slope, removing the 25%?
I guess
So we have that at least.
I'm probably more comfortable if it came from the county commission.
Okay.
Rather than us spinning our wheels and going through all this work and it gets to them and they say,
Yeah, I would
That
personally
makes
rather them
sense.
be separate.
if
I
they're
would.
fine with it, then yeah.
Would be my recommendation, unless the county commission feels strongly that they need to be together. Because I see them as two separate issues.
And I
Personally-
do too. I was just trying to be efficient.
Okay.
So that's why, but yeah, absolutely.
So it sounds like we haven't had 25% being challenged. Have we seen a lot of issues with 15% to 25% lately in terms of sliding or? So I'm just trying to understand. I know there's data, but has it been a recent?
I can't speak to if there's been any slides. I haven't received any information about slides on 15%, anything like that. Anybody that's wanting to build a house or habitable space that exceeds 1,000 square feet and is not part of the exceptions is required to do a geohazard. Every property is required to do a geotech regardless of whether they're supposed to do a geohazard or not. That's not negotiable. That's part of the building permit. The geohazard, though, is required based on soil, slope, and a couple other requirements. The 15% is already in our code. That's not.
Understood. I was just trying to understand because we're changing it. But so I was just wondering if something's happened recently that's prompted this. That was all.
Over the last year and a half, we've had multiple conversations with property owners who want to build on property that is majority greater than 25%. And out of caution, the county attorney and I and the engineer and geologist have worked on a text amendment to try to mitigate that liability that the county would have.
This is a question for Janet. Isn't a property owner, when they buy a property, they have to do the due diligence? So it's on them technically, if you make an offer on a lot, to look and see what's buildable. I mean, like it's like when you buy a house and you look through your inspection, right?
That's correct, but I think to the point that when we were discussing this, when I was discussing it with Mark, is if I've got a couple $2 billion and I can mitigate all the damages that are potential problems, are you not taking my property if I'm willing to make the investment and do the required mitigation to make it safe? So, I mean, I guess
Technically, so my question
yes,
is,
you need to
it's
do your
on
due
them
diligence.
to do the due diligence.
But what if their due diligence comes back when they have their geotech or their engineer look at it and say, yeah, I think, even though you got a 40% slope here, which I think is way too high, but we can mitigate it. We can, if you're willing to spend this amount of money, you can build on it. So then at that point, do we have an arbitrary percentage out there where we're saying, nope, can't build on it?
I would add to that during the due diligence period, there isn't enough time to do a geohazard or a full geohazard report, geoscoping application. Obviously, they can put that back on the property owner. But when you do a title report and it comes back that it's a legal lot, then the assumption is that you can put a house there because it's already recorded. It's a legal developable lot. So.
Yeah, and it's furthermore, when you're getting your title commitment, you're just looking at your title commitment. It's not going to tell you the geohazards or what sort of latent defects might be on the property. There's latent defects. That doesn't go back to the original property owner. Those are things you just don't know.
If they mitigate costs, right? If they just spend the money, mitigate the cost, but there's something written in our code of 25%, the geotech may get off because they did their job, but that rich person's coming back at the county if there is a percentage written in the code. So, that's the issue, right? That's what we're really talking about.
That's correct. And I'm trying to pull up some case law. It was Garrett that had looked into this before. I hadn't done a bunch of research into.
It's an interesting concept to have Garrett recommend it, that the number gets striked, but what, I understand the safety and soundness too of it, right? Who wants to see that as a neighbor, your neighbor's house go down and you have to stare at that forever? But I think they're two separate issues. The safety and soundness is one thing, the legal liability to the county is another.
That's correct. Yeah.
And that was kind of my question, as far as we sit as a commission, looking as far as legal liability for the county.
We're pushing the liability onto their experts.
So I know the answer to the question already, but I'm going to ask it anyway. We've had this in operation. We had houses built in Mountain Green that have fallen off their moorings, and I'm quite sure we had that discussion, or whoever sat on the planning commission at that time, and probably were assured that we're good. So I'm curious, from either staff or legal, what assurances do you have? I guess you're just going to say if there's a problem, you pay for whatever damages you caused.
That's going to fall back on the liability of the people signing off on the geotech and your engineers that are
county, right,
stamping
Jen?
it. Yeah.
Not the county.
Not the county.
And you can enforce that, all right?
Yes,
We let
I
somebody
believe
build
so.
on a 70% slope, with concrete moorings go down to bedrock.
If they have experts signing off on it and stamping it, and
So walk that through me with the legal aspect. How does that go when their house falls off or whatever and someone gets hurt?
Then they're suing their engineer and geotech report people.
And it
There's
ruins.
no action back on the county, right?
If, yeah, as long as we have
The
not
county
been
cleaned up the
negligent
ones down in
and
Mountain
they've
Green
got,
before.
I'm sorry, I talked
County cleaned up the ones down in Mountain Green before.
And they were signed off.
and I don't know anything about those. And I don't know what our code looked like then. I don't know what the process of legal evaluation was then. I don't know.
That's why
Any of
we
those
have
factors.
a geohazard code now.
Yeah.
We didn't then.
I'm just gonna make a comment, and I'm gonna make it. I have a neighbor who had multiple engineers tell him that he couldn't build his lot, and he found someone who would. And hasn't had any issues. It's only been there a couple of years, but I would challenge that, even though maybe it doesn't fall liability on the county, if something happens, it could hurt neighboring home values, it could hurt their home, it could cause other issues. And I always go back to healthcare because that's what I do in my day job. But if you want surgery, you can always find a surgeon that will operate. Even if 9 tell you you can't, there's always going to be one. And that's, again, that's an analogy that works in my head. So that's my only thought with, it's less about just protecting, the neighboring properties. And anyway, I agree that we should limit county liability. I'm not anti that. Maybe this would be something we should table to the county commission because I think it is a bigger issue.
Should they be able to direct at their next meeting? That doesn't need to be an agenda item or anything for direction. Isn't that just in?
I think they can direct without it being an agenda item. That's my understanding and what I've seen before.
Postpone to
Any,
a date certain? Maybe
Just push the commission.
Yeah, no. At the commission meeting, if they want this to come back, I will renotice it and I will make sure it's more clear, the language.
Are we in public hearing right now?
no, we went out.
There's no need to make a motion one way or the other. You can just go on to the next item.
Cool.
We'll see if the county commission wants to bring it back. If not, then it won't come back.
Next item. Moving on to our code enforcement text amendment.
All right, so I'm going to be presenting this one. Our code enforcement penalty section for land use, the 155.999, was very confusing and limiting. And like, honestly, I think it was Chris, or actually it was before we got Chris. Josh brought an enforcement issue to me, and reading through our old code, it's absolutely completely confusing how to do it, as well as looking at whether or not there's due process or it was legal. So what I did was revised 155.99 completely. The big thing was making sure that we had a good list of remedies available to us. And so that's what's listed first under violations and penalties. And then enforcement, going through and making a very clear step-by-step process that made it easy to understand how it was enforced, and then going through and making it easy to understand how to appeal any decision of enforcement. Now, this was on the agenda for the last planning commission, but we didn't have the one before, and we didn't have planning commission, and so it just went up to the county commission. They took a look at it. Member Newton had a couple issues that he really wanted planning commission to take a look at this. And so I'm hoping like you guys will be really engaged with me in trying to figure out how you guys want this to look. Because I don't have a dog in this fight. I just want it simple and easy to follow and easier for me to enforce and easier for code enforcement to be able to do their jobs. So a couple of the things that I'll just start going forward or from the top. Member Newton had a problem with the emergency abatement, maybe not necessarily a problem. He was a little concerned about that. I'm wondering if we just tailor the language up a little bit, that this isn't something that we're gonna be doing just, you know, arbitrarily or just because we can, that these are significant issues that really need addressing. And so my thoughts on that is I think the imminent and substantial danger, I think that it is limiting language for when we would ever go in and do an emergency abatement. But I think that we could tailor the language a little bit more so that it says, take only those actions that are reasonably necessary and narrowly tailored to eliminate the immediate threat. And then add a paragraph in about whenever practical, the county shall attempt to notify the responsible party before entering the property. Following the emergency action, the county shall provide written notice of the abatement, description of the actions taken, and an itemized statement of the cost. And then we can go on to the civil debt recovery. So that's my recommendation, to maybe address some of his concern regarding that one. Then his next concern was over if we get to civil enforcement, number 6, under the notice to comply. So our old ordinance had our fines, the civil fine of up to $100 a day. That amount is way too low. And so I bumped it up to 1,000. There are other county ordinances that are 1,000 or 750. Now, under those start immediately upon the notice of the violation. Under how I've structured this one, you're not going to get charged that civil fine until after the 30 days. You've had that 30 days notice to comply. So you might have had the 10-day notice, which is courtesy, we don't have to do that. But then you would have the 30 days notice to comply, the 30 days to get into compliance. Any civil fine wouldn't be assessed until after that 30 days. Additionally, there is a line in there where if you don't think you can get everything cleaned up within that 30 days, you can request an extension. So really, anybody who is legitimately working on whatever violation that they've gotten notice of has plenty of time in order to fix it. Additionally, they can also, if they don't think that they are in violation prior to the end of that 30 days, then they can file an appeal. So I think it provides for a lot of due process. Now, going back to the $1,000. Now, I left it up to maybe assessed up to $1,000 per violation per day, just kind of mirroring the old language from the other statute. What I think is probably better is if we maybe pick an amount for first offense, second offense, and third offense in 12 months and make it a 12-month period. And then I guess that's up to you how much you want to do it. I still think we want to start a little high at like maybe the first offense 500, second 750, and third 1,000, simply because if you're getting to that, actually getting the civil fine imposed,
Non-compliant.
you had plenty of opportunity to fix it. Additionally, the fine amount, I have a provision in there that the fine amount can be appealed to the hearings officer. So if you guys want to come up with an amount for first, second, third offense, I think that would be a good revision to what I've previously drafted.
Reasonable to me.
Yeah,
Does it? Are you sure? Okay.
I think it's
I
enough
like
that it
the five.
catches somebody's eye and.
I like that it's set up to me is like, well, am I a $200 person or am I a $1,000 person? Like if you look at the code, it's not clear.
It isn't.
And so, and then who enforces that and who sets that amount and how is that like, so I feel like that could be a
Consistent.
gray area a little bit in terms of enforcing.
Yes.
Like, hey, I'm not a $1,000 person. I'm a $500 person, you know?
I'm a
So,
$200 person.
If it's
Yes.
set, I feel like it's a little bit, like even before it was 25 to 100, it's like, you know, how do you decide that?
Right.
And then everyone plays by the same rules.
Yes, yeah, I like that a lot. So then I cleaned up how the appeals work. Our old code said it goes to what is it? Law judge, administrative law judge, or adjudicatory law judge. Well, we don't have an adjudicatory law judge. We have an appeals officer. So I don't even know how you're supposed to appeal.
I have another question for you.
That would be great.
Take you off
Yes.
your
No.
Train of thought. Do we have an enforcement now? Do we have a code of enforcement?
We
You
have
said?
Chris, who's wonderful,
Okay,
and
that's
has
what I
been
thought.
going through this with me.
Cool. That's
Yes,
one thing I wanted for a long time. so.
yes. And so now if we can have a good penalty section, so we can enforce it really well, it's gonna be awesome.
Okay.
So yeah, I cleaned up the language on that, so now it goes through our appeals officer. I then also, under state law, if like our county code or city code, whoever, doesn't say how long you have to appeal, the default under state code is you got 10 days after the written denial or the enforcement action or whatever decision, you have 10 days. Under our previous one, it was like 30 days in some sections, and I just brought it back down to 15 and made it consistent throughout our code. So every appeal, you got 15 days to file the appeal. I think that gives people enough time, but not too much time to let things get out of hand. So appeal authority I got fixed, the timing. So then as part of it, I went in to under the appeals officer or appeals section of the code. The only thing that changed in that is I changed it to the 15 days. So that's consistent. Now the other question that Member Newton had was, so in trying to streamline everything, I went through like our entire land use code and found anytime there was an appeal. There are two other sections in our code. Which are, where did I put them? It's 155, I think 347, or 437 and 444. It talks about appeals, and appeals are to go to the county commission, and it's appeals from the planning commission decisions regarding small subdivisions. Member Newton wasn't sure that he wanted it to go to the appeals officer, and so wanted you guys to weigh in on that. Whether you wanted it to continue to go to the county commission for the appeal or to the appeals officer. The one thing I like about the appeals officer is it kind of pulls it out of politics. It's consistent for everybody regarding, if it's a small subdivision decision or an enforcement issue or a land use decision, it's all going to one person. It also kind of helps pull you guys out of, public influence or, things like that, puts it all on the hearings officer. So those are some of the reasons why it was kind of the consensus of us all working on this to put it as the appeals officer. But I don't see any reason, like, I don't have any heartburn either way. I don't see anything super awful or illegal either way. If we just want to leave that, the small subdivision appeals with the county commission.
Yeah, that's the only thing I seen that was struck was planning commission was struck out and then county commission was struck out, and I left it just to appeals officer or that authority. I guess I was a little bit concerned is it takes any of those with constituents or anybody out of it and leaves it on one person, which
Instead of a body or two bodies.
I had a little bit of, not necessarily heartburn, concern that way, that it would take all of those individuals who were put into place to make those decisions out of it and puts it on one person's biased or non-biased, whatever. So I had a concern that way. It was, what was it, 155.437?
Yep, 437 and 440.
That was the only concern I had that I thought
So-
maybe would be worth discussion.
Yeah, and it's really up to you guys. You're the policymakers and
So I'm just
recommendations.
curious if you took to your conclusion, Chance, what'd you do? You have 2 Board of Appeals guys or 3 Board of Appeals guys?
I guess my only concern was just it goes to one person and you strike out everybody, where taking the county commission out of it is those individuals who have been voted in and chosen to make those decisions. We take them totally out of it, put it on one individual, and it's just their decision. Concerned that way. If I was
Good point.
if I was an individual, and I'm like, well, I'm not saying this, but whoever that person is, if they have any sort of bias towards me, am I getting any just action afterwards? A concern I had. And maybe it's not worth the concern. Maybe that was just something I was reading into it more than and a liability put only on that one person or the whole county on one person.
Subdivision is a check the box. I mean, I don't know how
Right.
many,
And maybe where it was
Right.
just subdivision, it's not a
Exactly.
concern.
it's not, yeah. But on the other hand, a normal subdivision over the 10 lots, we would only recommend to the county commission. So it kind of seems to flow that way with subdivisions anyway. So it kind of makes sense
That's what I'm saying. Now we're taking it completely
out of it,
out of
yeah.
the same flow that we had before. And I'm not necessarily sure that the planning commission would have any jurisdiction or say in that, but county commission maybe should still hear it where that flow is already set forth prior to. I'm curious of what you guys' thoughts are on that one.
I agree with you. I think a larger body can be just a good thing for checks and balances, and
And
that's the way it's been.
It takes that one individual out of having to make that decision and bear
Yeah.
total responsibility on themselves.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense to leave it with the people who have been voted in for that very purpose rather than one individual. I think that would put a lot of liability on that individual, potentially.
Well, they're probably attorneys or something. What's your criteria for sitting on that Board of Appeals?
So for the hearings officer, under state code, your appeals authority can be your county commission. It can be someone that the county commission appoints, a hearings officer, or it can be it's either administrative law judge or something like that. It's yeah.
So now it's a
LJ.
There's a
definition
little bit gray
question.
there
Yeah.
where we just struck
So
out county
it can be-
commission. It's been into a gray area where what was county commission was very
Clear.
Yeah.
clear. It goes to county commission. And that's where that decision's made.
And I think it makes I don't have any issue keeping it with the subdivision because it does make sense. But I think keeping the appeals officer like we have under our code for all the other appeals makes a lot of sense because we're going to have more of those. We've got a quick time frame. They're independent, and so that makes sense. But yeah, I don't have any heartburn either way with the subdivision stuff if we leave the county commission. Okay, then, when I was kind of going over this with Chris after this was submitted and everything, one of the things I started thinking about is inspections and the right to inspect. And so I did some research and now I can't find it. But under, oh yeah, here it is. Under the Utah Rules of Criminal Procedure, Rule 40, under K, we can allow our enforcement officer to apply for a search warrant if he believes or has probable cause that there's any violation of our county ordinances in relation to health, safety, building, or animal cruelty. And then they can apply to a judge and ask for a warrant to inspect the property. So I want to add that in. It's under state law, so we could always do it anyway. But what I'd like to do is add a provision H that just says, you know, right of entry and inspection. During reasonable hours, the zoning administrator, code enforcement officer, building official, or their designee may enter property with consent to inspect for compliance. If access is denied and the official has probable cause to believe a violation exists, they may apply to a magistrate for an administrative warrant authorizing entry in compliance with Utah Rules of Criminal Procedure 40K. Just so there's kind of some notice out there for people that allow us to come in and inspect. So I don't know if Chris has any thoughts on it.
I was only going to say, if you're ever coming to that point, we are only talking about the worst of the worst properties. I would say out of the 65 properties that I'm working with now, 2 of them would fit into that. But I'll just give you a kind of, without telling you where they're at, just kind of give you a little description. They're drug homes. There's illegal habitation at the properties, whether they're living in trailers in the backyards. The trailers never move, therefore sewage is getting dumped out onto the property, different things like that. This is worst of the worst properties. I was in a jurisdiction to the west for quite some time, and this was not used all the time, but it was very beneficial when it needed to be. And if the code officer was ever going to be utilizing this, they would be closely working with the sheriff's office to make sure that all safety procedures and everything else was in place. But that's why these kinds of things would be in place.
And the state rule requires that if the warrant is granted by the judge, a judge has to determine whether or not that it has to be served by an actual law enforcement officer, like a sheriff's deputy. Code enforcement couldn't do it, but they could attend, they could go along. And that's everything that I think I've addressed. Member Newton's, like, all his concerns. And yeah.
Can you repeat the changes to the emergency abatement that you were
Yes.
recommending?
So okay. Take only those actions that are reasonably necessary and narrowly tailored to eliminate the immediate threat. And then a second paragraph that says, whenever practicable, the county shall attempt to notify the responsible party before entering the property. Following the emergency action, the county shall provide written notice of the abatement, a description of the actions taken, and an itemized statement of the costs incurred. And then it would just go on to the civil debt recovery.
have a question, and it's on page 13 of our packet. It's under the 155.030. Up in your box scores, you've made the correction, but it doesn't show up in the text. You're adding quick fix,
The fix-it tickets.
those two. There's one on B2 and then there's one in D. And it didn't show up. The one in D, just calendars left off. Do you want the calendar days always, wherever you refer to 15 days, is it always calendar days throughout all the changes, or just?
Yes, I guess I can make that. I think I have calendar days under there. No, I don't with all my days have calendar days.
Is that what?
You know, I don't know that it matters. But it should be consistent though. Either have calendar days or 10 days. Yeah. So I can make that amendment, either remove the calendar from it, or just add calendar to all the days. But yeah, that's AI double checking my work and making me nice little fancy boxes.
Give it under the two, how, I guess I'm not sure how it reads. I mean, up in your boxes. It's there.
Can you pull that up?
It's page 13 of the packet.
Hang on. Oh wait, I can get up there. Jeremy was
Jeremy's
working on my computer. He overtook it, so I couldn't move to it.
Under B2, there's no changes. There's no bolding. The changes weren't put in that were identified up in the boxes.
Oh, so it might have been that I took out the changes. It might have been an old, because I did not make any other changes to this one other than changing the 15 days.
Okay.
In D. Yeah, so it might have been AI picking up an old revision that I undid and didn't.
Up in the box in the proposed text
Yeah.
on page 3.
Yeah, I believe the only thing that changed is under D, appeals. In 2 places, it changed it from 30 days to 15.
Yeah, you say, I think we should put in
Oh,
45 deadline to schedule hearing.
I do. I would recommend that. So I didn't want to fuss with and just destroy all the code, and the less I could mess with it. But I would really recommend that the appeals and variance officer schedule that appeal within 45 days of
And that
receiving it.
That would go in B2.
Yes.
But not the other change, just that change.
Just that change in B2. Yeah.
So I don't have a preference on the calendar days. Someone just put calendar in there or not. I don't.
And when I'm drafting these, I sometimes get blind to words. I read it how I want it to read, not how it reads.
That being said, if we do, calendar days 15 and then 45, we should do it 45 calendar days. Like, we should just make it the same everywhere. So I'm good
Yes,
either way.
I'm gonna make it
Yep, okay.
consistent all the way through.
And then notice 10 calendar days in advance.
Yep.
Any more discussion? We need to move into a public hearing. Do you have a motion to move into a public hearing? Member McMillan, second. Member Wilson, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, all, motion carries unanimous. We're moving into a public hearing. Do you have a comment to make on this, code text change? Please come forward and state your name into the microphone. Gotta come to the microphone and give your name. Yep. And just FYI, we technically don't answer questions, but you can state your concerns.
Lucas Gray from Mountain Green. My wife and I are dealing with this not in the sense that we have gone against code, but that our property has been built too close to, and we're trying to come to a resolution because there was no real clarity on what the effects of, or like how we move forward with it. Because as far as we're aware of, our neighbors either deal with the county in fixing the issue or deal with us, and if they can't come to an agreement with us, they deal with the county. And I guess there's been meetings between our neighbor and the county commissioner or our representative or somebody. And are those meetings that we need to be a part of? Is this because they're looking for a variance for their building on their lot, and that would affect our lot, and that would allow us to get a variance on our lot as well, correct? I guess no question, I'm sorry.
You can ask them, we just can't answer right now during public hearing.
That's our concern that we're trying to bring forward, is we didn't really know where to bring that up, and the timeline on when they need to get it fixed by, because they were approached months ago, I guess, and now just have come to us about a month ago and said we need to fix this issue. We've kind of talked a little bit between them and the county commissioner, kind of looking at what our options are, and the process on their building has not stopped, and we're wondering if that was something that was in this text as well, whether it was, hey, you guys were at fault, you built on their property and this needs fixed, but they're still building and we don't know who to talk to about it, because we talked to our commissioner about it and she's like, yep, just figure it out with them. And we've met together, but it has not been productive. I didn't know when to bring that up or where to bring it up. You'll have to forgive my noviceness, but just wanted to bring that up, and I guess there's no more questions, so I can just.
You can, thank you.
Tina Kelly, Mountain Green. I read through this and I didn't have any issues, but then I was listening to Janet's explanation, and was there something added at the end? Something about allowing the code enforcer to go on to private property? I know I can't ask. So this is my concern. I have the right to be safe on my property. It's marked no trespassing, but is this giving somebody the right to overrule that? Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no additional public comment, do I have a motion to go out of public hearing?
I motion.
Motion, Member King, second, Member Telford, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Do you want to maybe address some of this, Jen?
Absolutely. So the right to get a warrant to enter property, that's already allowed under state law. It's under the Utah Rules of Criminal Procedure, Rule 40, under sub K, which specifically addresses allowing like the code enforcement officer to apply for a search warrant on under limited things in relation to health, safety, building, and animal cruelty violations to county ordinances. And then a judge has to sign off on that to find there's probable cause that a violation has been made or is likely to be made, and allow for that search warrant. And then it has to be executed by an actual law enforcement officer. So it's already allowed in state code. It's just, I would like to put that in our code so it's kind of a notice to people to be aware of that, hey, that's out there.
And it's my understanding from Chris's comment that this is going to be used in severe cases, right? Like you're not.
Yes, I mean, if you're asking for a search warrant on a building violation, yeah. Oh, here's the other thing in the safeguards in it. It has to be reviewed by a prosecuting attorney first before it's presented to the judge. So it's gonna have to go through our office first, then through a judge. So that's
Processes-
only time.
Processes are in place then to make sure diligence is done.
An absolutely due process, and that it adheres to our Fourth Amendment rights.
The other concern that was brought forward about if there is a violation and how that's, do you want to address that?
So with the violations, it's gonna run through our code enforcement officer, who has been awesome. And once we have this penalty section fixed, we're gonna have a really nice process to go through where we can actually document and follow the right procedure every time and apply it to everyone that comes in front of us. So
So the person he probably needs to speak to then is our code enforcer and file a claim, and not our county commission.
that's correct.
Another question on that, and this may or may not fall under that. What if you find, this is just general curiosity, let's say someone did overbuild your lot line, but you don't see it till after. Can you do anything retroactively and go,
If there's abatement,
okay,
there is code enforcement. There's also state laws that allow private parties to enforce against other private parties. So there are other avenues too. But yeah, and that's why, you know, abatement always has been, I think, available to us, but I really wanted us to list out all the possible remedies. And I think, what do we have? Quite a few of them, 12 or 11, 10, no, 9. But like the stop work orders, the injunctive relief, abatement, just making sure that we have all the tools, not that we have to use them or not, but they're there.
So I think I heard the answer to Tina's question, but in his case, in Mr. Gray's situation, does that create a situation where someone can trespass on someone's property without what they perceive as permission?
In this issue, the neighbor has not trespassed on their property. It's a setback issue. They've built their accessory structure closer to the property line. The building is complete. We just haven't given them a C of O for the building yet. The county commissioner in question contacted me, set up a meeting with the property owners to find out what they could do. I've met with the property owners. It was suggested that it would be easier for them to work with the property owner in doing a plat amendment to adjust the lot line by land swap. I don't know how that went. It's not really my job to tell people how to solve the problem. But it is a code enforcement active case. That's about all I can say about it.
Discussion.
So if anybody wants to do a motion to maybe make this easier to track where I think you guys are going, is if you make a recommendation for the county commission to pass the ordinance with the my recommended changes and to fix the calendar days, but to leave 155, 437, and 440 alone and not amend those. And then add, search warrant part, which that's part of my recommendations. So does that cover it more easily?
Do we need to list all those things out, or
I think you can refer to Janet's recommended adjustments to the
write them
proposed.
down? But there's that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So I make a motion for approval with conditions outlined by Janet. Move forward with code enforcement code text based upon the findings listed in the memorandum dated June 26, 2025, with those additional conditions.
And you don't want the amendments for the county commission, or removing the county commission on 440 and
You want me to list those
437?
out too? Okay.
Just say, to leave those
Yeah,
as is.
leaving the conditions on 155.437 of the county commission, and the tiered fine structure, and the additional search warrant language as discussed. Did I cover everything?
That's a recommend approval.
Recommend approval. Good.
You have a motion? Thank you, Member McMillan, for the motion. Do I have a second? Second, Member Wilson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Moving on. Can we pull up our? It's right here. Okay. Any business or staff questions? Any questions for business? I have a motion to approve the minutes from our June 12th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting.
I motion.
Motion, Member King.
I'll second it.
Second, Member Sessions. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimous.
So moved.
So,
Adjourn.
Second.
oh, yes. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Member Sessions.
Second.
Second, Member King. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Any opposed?
You've been awesome at that.
Motion carries unanimous.